For today's history tidbit, as we continue thinking about God's faithfulness to Berwick Baptist Church for these last 192 years, I want to introduce you to someone else. In a previous video, I introduced you to the Reverend Edward Manning, as well as the Reverend William Chipman. But in this video, I don't want to introduce you to a former church member or to a former church pastor, but rather I want to introduce you to someone who we know was at the church and spoke at the church on a special celebration of an important milestone in the life of our church. But before I introduce that person, I want to set the scene. From what I can tell, it would seem that the Berwick Baptist Church has quite the legacy of celebrating important milestones in the life of the church and doing it in excellent fashion. And so we have a Berwick Register article from June 1928 that tells all about the celebrations of the 100th anniversary of the church. And so you'll remember that the church was founded in 1828, and so in 1928, in June, they celebrated the 100th anniversary of the church. And it seemed like it was quite the event. Various Baptist ministers from all across the province spoke. They had a morning and evening service. They had a banner that was prominently displayed that said 1828 Centenary 1928. And one of the guests that was there was the Dr. F.W. Patterson, the then current president of Acadia University. And so it was quite the event. And then if we fast forward a few years, in 1958, they celebrated the 100th anniversary of the building of the current house of worship. And so the current house of worship, the one that we actually still worship in, at least part of that, it was added to over the years, of course, but that was built in 1858, and so the 100th anniversary of that was celebrated in June of 1958. And on that occasion, there was various events, but they also published the Berwick Baptist Church History, and this was done under the direction of the Reverend Davidson. And then they also put out a little souvenir booklet as well. And so, again, quite the event. There was a photo, and one of the guests at that event as well was the then current president of Acadia University, Watson Kirkconnell. And so these were important events, special events, as they celebrated important milestones in the life of the church. And so I just want to back up to June 1928 in this Berwick Register article. One of the people who were present for that celebration, and I'll remind you that the pastor at that time was the Reverend Allaby. One of the people that was present for that and actually spoke was the Reverend Dr. John Howard MacDonald. And that's the person who I want to introduce you to. And so on the occasion of the 100th celebration, the 100th anniversary of the Berwick Baptist Church, the Berwick Register article says that the Dr. John Howard MacDonald, then pastor of Wolfville Baptist Church, stated he was glad to have part in so notable a service. He said the contributions by this church in 100 years of service could not be estimated. So much had been given to the integrity of the community, to the educational and social life, no less than the spiritual life. And so we know then, on one of the Sundays in June, at the evening service, the Reverend Dr. John Howard MacDonald was present and spoke in the current sanctuary that we still worship in, which I think is pretty awesome. And so John Howard MacDonald is quite the figure from our own denomination's history. A few years back, I was able to be part, actually, of putting out an ACBAS booklet, the Acadia Center for Baptist and Anabaptist Studies, that tells all about the life of the Reverend John Howard MacDonald, known by some as the Cardinal. John Howard MacDonald is a fascinating character. He was born in 1863 in Cape Breton, and he served various pastorates over his years in prominent churches, Amherst Baptist Church. He served at the Fredericton Baptist Church, as well as serving as the pastor of the oldest continuing Baptist congregation in Canada, the Wolfville Baptist Church. In addition to that, he also served as a chaplain during the First World War, which of course for me is quite significant because my wife Kayla serves as a chaplain, as a padre in the Canadian Armed Forces. And so John Howard MacDonald served during the First World War. He was over in Europe with the troops, and he was able to rise up to the rank of lieutenant colonel, which is a significant thing in and of itself, but particularly significant given the time in which John Howard MacDonald lived. And so he's a fascinating character, and I wanted to introduce you to him because we know that he was at the church on a particular Sunday in June 1928. I want to tell you one little story about John Howard MacDonald, as well as read you a poem that he wrote. And so one story is told in this little booklet written by Roger Prentice about when he was pastor at the Fredericton Baptist Church. And so Roger Prentice, the author, says this: one story recorded in a recent history of this church, the Fredericton Baptist Church, concerns their baptistry, which was, at that time, located beneath the floor of the pulpit. Imagine that. One Sunday, MacDonald, forgetting that it had been opened for some reason, stepped back and fell into the water, successfully delaying the service whilst he quickly retreated to the parsonage for dry garments. And so, quite a story, fell right back into the baptistry. I want to also read you a poem that he wrote while he was in Amherst, while he was pastoring at Amherst, and it's called Build Higher. And it says this: I saw a bird on a tree. 'Twas when springtime came with its shower, and sunshine and fragrance of flower, and it built its nest near the earth, the birthplace of gladness and mirth. The thought of a serpentine foe, lying hidden in ambush below, never entered that innocent breast, as it sang and builded its nest. 'Tis no fanciful picture I see of a desolate nest in that tree, so I call till my voice gins to tire. Sweet songster, build higher, build higher. I saw a youth start in life. 'Bout his path there were clusters of flowers, leafy shade and sequestering bowers, and he said, here I'll build me a nest, and when weary I'll hie me the rest. Surely this is the paradise place for all who succeed in the race, never dreaming the spoiler lay near, mid scenes so delightfully dear. Like the desolate nest on the tree, a life wrecked and saddened I see. So my word to all youth is aspire, build the nest, build higher, build higher. And so there we have it then. We know that on an evening in June 1928, that the Reverend Dr. John Howard MacDonald, a significant character in the history of our denomination, was at our church in the sanctuary and actually addressed the congregation at that time. A pretty fascinating little bit of history, a little bit of a tidbit of our own Berwick Baptist Church history. God bless.